I thought it would be good for the end of the year to reflect on spiritual and mental health. A lot of people, particularly in December, have a lot of stress from the holidays, familial, personal, economic, social, professional obligations. December tends to be a very stressful month for a lot of people. And I thought it would be useful for us in our studies to reflect upon a very particular principle within our psychological and spiritual work. It has to do with the state of our mind, our mental and emotional well-being, particularly in relationship to energy. Psychological health is essential in our Gnostic studies. We place a lot of emphasis on the quality of our level of being, the quality of our life. And in this lecture, we'll go into a lot of detail about how our behaviors affect our mental health. And we'll approach this study from the perspective of a spiritual lens. So what we're offering here, obviously, is not professional medical advice. What we're offering here are spiritual techniques, which can complement any regimen, which don't have side effects or other consequences. These tools and practices are applicable to any person of any religion, of any denomination, of any background, of any faith. I invite you to study what we have to offer here and to apply it in accordance with your needs. And I hope that as we expound upon some of these pragmatic teachings, that you find something useful in an application to your own life. It would be good to emphasize what genuine health is, because in our studies, we have a very particular perspective. We've included some etymology to give us a basic foundation of how to approach our spiritual life. In Old English, we see the term health. One moment, please. We've included here some definitions. The Old English health, meaning wholeness, being whole, sound or well. Also from the term hal, meaning hail or whole, and hylon, to heal. It is also from the Proto-Germanic hailitho, from kylo, whole, uninjured, of good omen. And the Old English heilig, Old Norse helge, holy, sacred, heil, healthy. What's significant about these definitions is that genuine health pertains not only to a physical state of equilibrium. Obviously, with any machine, if one part is corroded, is imperfect, is deficient, then the rest of the system will malfunction. In truth, this statement applies to our psychology, to the quality of our mind. And if we are very sincere with ourselves and we observe ourselves, we will find that on a psychological level, we are not whole. We are disparate. We are conflicted and afflicted. Most of us, if we're honest, would admit that we have parts of ourselves that perhaps we don't like. There is opposition or contradiction to our character. Our abilities, our quality of mind. We tend not to be unitary in our psychological experience. In one moment, we may be afflicted with anger. In the next moment, by fear. In the next, by intense attachment and desire. We are split among many factors, many desires, many elements. And it is the result of this disequilibrium and our paradoxical nature, our conflicting nature, that we suffer, that we experience pain. And it is the purpose of these studies to understand the root of that conflict, to observe it, to see from a conscious perspective the root of our mind, the root of our states, so that we can become whole, we can become healed. The ancients thought of health as something of sacred origin, because we know in a basic level that if we are not healthy physically, it is impossible to perform a deep spiritual work. And so they knew and they understood that health is sacred. But more importantly, our relationship to our inner divinity is sacred. And that is the origin of genuine health, of totality, of peace. This is why we study the following diagram. This is the tree of life, the Kabbalah. It is not the sole patrimony of the Jewish mystical tradition, although this faith had codified a universal strata of symbols, conscious experiences, qualities of mind within a very particular diagram. This image, while it is particular to the Jewish tradition, is something universal. It represents our totality of being, from the most mundane, material, and dense below, to the most abstract, spiritual, and refined above. These are eternal truths. They are representations not only of our physical body, but also much more subtle levels of experience, qualities of mind, aspects of our psychology. And they map for us in a very detailed way where we are spiritually and what is the nature of our health. You see, this tree of life, as mentioned in the book of Genesis, is a symbol of us. Real life, real satisfaction is based upon health. And the essence of life is health. But that health manifests in different levels. It manifests in different types of experience. And it also reflects what we must do if we wish to understand and obtain real balance and equilibrium in our life. So this image we see has 10 spheres. It represents each level, each sephirah in Hebrew, an emanation or expression of who we are. Malkut in Hebrew is the physical body. It is the vehicle we use within this world to exist. It is the most obvious and verifiable for everyone. It is called the kingdom in Hebrew because it is the conglomeration of many elements, many parts, many principles, not only from this physical dimension itself, but from other internal principles within. Above that, we have yesod, which in Hebrew means foundation. It is our vital force. When you wake up physically in the morning, you have a general register or sense of what your state of energy is, how much vitality you have, how awake you are, how much energy you have to go through your day. And this energy can obviously fluctuate. So oftentimes when people think of health, they think of the physical body and they think of their vital energy, how much energy they have to go through the day and to do what needs to be done. But beyond that, we have our emotions relating to hod. This Hebrew term means splendor. It refers to our emotional experience, our feelings. It's important to remember too that this diagram of the tree of life not only represents our psychology, but also represents different dimensions in nature, which are experiences of matter, energy, and consciousness, perception at different levels of subtlety and expression. So whenever we go to dream at night, we find ourselves within the emotional world of hod. Some people call it the astral plane, the world of dreams, limbo, the third heaven, many names, which we've discussed and explained in our previous course called Dream Yoga and Astral Travel. But basically, within this dimension, we operate within a vehicle and body related to that level of nature. It also is the origin of our emotions, our emotional health, our heart. To the right, we have netzach, which means victory, relating to the mind, thoughts. And our thoughts originate from this sphere, which is also known as the mental body. And we travel in the mental world with a vehicle related to that level of nature, because each of these spheres represent vehicles, states of being, qualities of perception, but also matter, energy, and consciousness. Beyond that, obviously, we have more subtle levels of experience. For most people, it is easy to register the body and to sense vital energy, some relative degree of health or momentum in life to be able to move and do. Emotions are obviously real for us, but obviously they're not tangible within the physical body. We sense them, we experience them, but they're not made of physical matter. They were made of a different type of element relating to that world of hod, the astral world. Netzach, the mind, obviously relates to a different level of matter, energy, and perception. It is not originated in our physical brain, because as we see on the right, these three brains, or these three centers of experience in our physical human body, manifest these qualities from the tree of life. So we know we have a physical brain in our head, but our brain, like a car, only operates in accordance with its conditioning, with its fuel. The brain is not the origination of thought. It is the vehicle of thought. And the heart, which we can also call a brain in itself, is also a vehicle through which emotions express from this world of hod. And also, our physical body, our spinal column, is what manifests our vital force, our vital energy, and gives us life. The spine is the tree of life in our physical body. So there are many applications of this image which apply to our spiritual and mental and emotional well-being. But driving all of this, beyond our thoughts, which are more subtle than emotion, and then movement, we find will. The will to do, impulse. And we say that this sphere of will, known as tiferet in Hebrew, meaning beauty, is the beauty of the soul. For some people, it can be difficult to pinpoint what will is. But if you examine your impulse to attend a lecture of this type, you find that there's something driving you at that level. It's more subtle. It's more refined. And notice as we ascend up this glyph, we find more rarefied levels of experience. Unfortunately for us, these spheres in us are conflicted. They are also contaminated. Anyone who seriously studies themselves, or who perhaps has had some unfortunate diagnosis, perhaps for a condition, whether physical or emotional or mental, a disease of some type, they know from experience that their quality of life in their mind, their heart, and their body is suboptimal. They have sickness. They have disequilibrium. They have dis-ease, unsatisfaction, and pain. Where we demarcate from or diverge from professional medical science, materialistic science, in terms of health, has to do with our perspective. The source of disease, of disequilibrium, of psychological and even physical affliction, originates from within, primarily. Many states of suffering originate from the mind, but not the brain. The brain is a vehicle for something more subtle and internal. Likewise, the heart, emotional sicknesses, or even physical diseases of the heart have their origin within internal causes. Likewise, the body, with its sicknesses, has causes of affliction that originate not only from the physical body, but from within, from these internal principles, from a disbalance between mind and heart, between the body and its energies, and even our will. But obviously, as we approach and study ourselves and our relationship with higher ways of being, we study what is known as the consciousness. This is geburah in Hebrew, meaning justice. It is the equilibrium, the balance, the justice, the harmony of divinity. It is our root perception of what we really are, beyond will, beyond attachment, beyond craving, beyond fear. It is even before the will to do. And we sometimes refer to this sphere as intuition. Some of us may have a project we've been working on where we walk down the street, we're thinking very deeply about a problem, we can't seem to find a solution. And then suddenly, we know. We receive an insight without having to think about it. We let our mind rest for a moment, and suddenly the inspiration emerges. That is the root of our consciousness. It is knowing without having to think. But obviously, what comes later in terms of that project is our will, and using our mind to plan, organize ideas, working and managing our emotions as we struggle through that project, and then also using our body to act it out within our physical reality. So notice that from this example, these principles start from within and move without, not the other way around. We start from an idea and then it manifests physically. The same with all these dimensions and levels of being, qualities of being. So obviously beyond the consciousness is something more profound, which is the spirit, chesed, which means mercy in Hebrew. This is the real divine principle and spark within. This is our inner being. For a lack of a better term, we can call it our inner God. The truth, the spirit, which obviously for many people, we have many ideas and beliefs about the spirit, but no experience. And so it's the purpose of these studies to experience that for ourselves, because our inner divinity is the source of health, of purity of mind, of happiness. So by working within and understanding this dynamic, we can better understand how to refine our mind, our heart, our energy, our body, by using our willpower in service of the divine. That is the essential truth of this teaching. And that is where real health can flow within us like a fountain. So in this lecture, we're going to talk a lot about spiritual hygiene, psychic hygiene, psychological cleanliness. We've already received material explanations about physical health and hygiene. This is very obvious. But the purpose of this lecture is to talk about how we can cleanse ourselves spiritually. And we have this image here of the statue of the goddess Hygiene in Hamburg, Germany. In Greek mythology, her name is the root of hygiene, from the New Latin hygiena, or Greek hygiene, techne, or healthful art. She was known as the daughter of Asclepius, who is the Greek god of medicine and the son of Apollo, the goddess of sanitation and cleanliness. She's also the sister to Panacea, universal remedy, Iaso, recuperation from illness, Asesco, the healing process, and Aglaia, beauty, splendor, glory, magnificence, and adornment. People have literally interpreted these myths as superstitions of an ancient past. But in the Gnostic tradition, we like to study these symbols to understand their psychological value. So the goddess Hygeia represents something within us, our relationship with the divine. Throughout many world religions, water is a symbol that is prevalent within all faiths as a symbol of gestation, of creation, of purification. This has to do with our psychological level of being. And by working with the pure waters of life, symbolically, metaphorically speaking, with our energies, within the totality of everything we are, we learn to become psychologically aligned with the spirit. Because as we are now, our mind, our emotions, and our bodies tend to be very sick. We suffer with anger, with pride, with fear, with laziness, with gluttony, with lust. We suffer from many elements that cause pain for ourselves and for other people. We have many contaminants in a Buddhist sense, psychic aggregates, states of being which are very harmful, which cause pain for the whole world, for our communities, for our relationships. And so we want to cleanse ourselves of that. But first, we have to identify the root of the problem. But when we do, by observing ourselves, moment by moment, day to day, we discover what real purity is, not as a dogmatic, moral, stale code of rigid adherence to some doctrine or religion. It's not a belief system. It's a way of life. We learn to have a better relationship with the divine, our spirit, so that divinity can manifest in our deeds. In this way, we learn to bring to the world universal remedy. We also can recuperate from many illnesses because we're no longer propelling our bodies within behaviors that cause sickness. Likewise, we accelerate the healing process of our heart, our emotional pain, our mind, and we obtain real beauty and splendor of a spiritual type, glory from divinity, magnificence, and real adornment having to do with the virtues and titles that belong to the spirit, to the divine. And when we explore this topic, we go into great detail about what is known as the dayspring of youth. So we jump into this slide after having talked about the goddess Hygeia, who presents a fountain of life. And that fountain has a symbolic significance for our current present-day culture. Since the 1960s, we've noticed a great revolution. This revolution has impacted socioeconomics, class, religion, belief systems, politics, and more obviously, sexual relationships. The 60s is a period of great turmoil because it was the transition from one period of cosmic activity to a new one. And every change within nature is dramatic. Can be very apocalyptic in a sense, overpowering, because there are forces in nature that work upon the collective psyche of humanity that has great force. And it is the purpose of our studies to take advantage of it, to accelerate and catalyze our spiritual development. The influence that entered the collective mind of humanity from the 60s was known as the Dayspring of Youth, according to Master Moria from his book of that title. Samuel and Vier called it the Dionysian wave. And it's interesting because Dionysus is the god of wine and revelry, also known as Bacchus, within the Greek and Roman pantheons, is a dual symbol. That profound energy can produce the ecstasy of the soul, or its intoxication and damnation. This energy is polarizing, and that energy polarizes in accordance with our psychological state. Nobody can deny that in this period of time, there were great changes. And so we give a spiritual explanation for its origin, but also more importantly, how to take advantage of it. Not to be a victim of this energy, but to learn to use it spiritually. In just the same way that you put in fuel into a car, obviously you want to learn how to put in the best fuel so that it operates in accordance with its function. Likewise, we are taking in this energy day to day. It is called the Aquarian influence. And we are now currently, zodiacally speaking, in the age of Aquarius. Having moved from the Piscean traditions, Pisces, the zodiac symbol of the fish, to the water bearer, the fountain of life. And these influences not only present many changes within our culture and society, but also, more importantly, they initiate a new type of instruction. So different periods of time have always received different messengers, people who teach how to use this force. And so we're fortunate that in our tradition, as well as throughout the diverse religions of the world, there are instructions for how to master this dayspring of youth, so that this fountain of life can purify the mind. Here's what Master Moria had to say about the topic. At the beginning and the end of each age, there is a pouring forth of hierarchical cosmic streams of energy. And as they intermittently enter the Earth's atmosphere and unite, we find in this radiation that instruction best fitted for the time. Thus, there was brought to birth a new period of discovery for the world. This new force, called by initiates the dayspring of youth, has been in activity for some time. And they who respond to it and practice this Western yoga can enter the new era and become its instrument. This force, now working over Western Europe and America, possesses a new vitality and energy that will bring about a severance from past and inherited conditions. Minds that respond to it are clarified, and any opposition within the atmosphere of the mental body can no longer imprison them within its rebellious aura. For practice of this yoga attracts an atomic energy of a finer nature and transmutes the consciousness. If you've studied the writings of Samuel and Vior, he talks all the time about alchemy, transforming the dense lead of our personality into the gold of the spirit. So by working with the energies of our body, but also of nature, by activating the spiritual power within the atom, we transform ourselves, our mind. And therefore, this energy, which is referenced here as atomic, has to do with spiritual forces, principles, atoms, and units of energy that we harness within our bodies, but also our mind and within our being. So these are not physical atoms, but these are, more importantly, spiritual principles. This also explains why in our current era, there seems to be a greater prevalence of mental disorders. There are more cases of people who are suffering mental illness. Now, conventional science would argue that this has to do with the fact that before the 60s, obviously there was a greater stigma attached to mental health concerns. And so many people who are perhaps ill would not diagnose themselves or perhaps seek diagnosis or seek help because it was considered a point of shame. But from a spiritual perspective, we are pointing out that this energy of the Dionysian wave, this energy of the cosmos, of the zodiac, of Aquarius, is producing a great change. And it is essential that we learn to take advantage of it. Otherwise, we'll become a victim. That energy will be transformed in the wrong way. And as evidenced by our history within the past couple of decades, we've seen a great deterioration of moral, psychological, and spiritual values. While there has been a great rebirth of spiritual traditions since the 60s, the reality is that we have to look at the consequences and behaviors of their adherents, these participants. What are they actually producing? We see that in our current society, there is greater suffering prevalent everywhere, and that people can't seem to escape these conflicts. So, by taking advantage of this energy, we learn to enter a new way of life, because this force is quite impactful. Moria states the following: in the future, the energy of this new age will inflict upon us a series of mental disorders. For those minds that will not respond to its wisdom and power will recoil from it. The secret enemy will have no method of diverting its force, and those who have attracted this new energy will suffer from periods of illusion and depression. But the aspiring student will not be affected. He will be in tune with its vibration and will render it homage and respect. What is the secret enemy? It is pride, it is anger, it is fear, it is lust, it is gluttony. Negative psychological states. It is our animal inheritance, our desires, which are the origin and progenitors of suffering. It is a secret to us because if we are not looking actively within our psychology, moment by moment, we will not see it, the source of perhaps all of our conflicts in life. So when that energy enters us, the Aquarian influence, with its potential wisdom and power, it can't be rejected. It has to be used. It has to be transformed. But unfortunately, we tend to use it in the wrong way, as evidenced by the social decline that we are witnessing year by year. There's no way to divert this force. One either has to use it consciously or be its puppet. Better said, to be a puppet of our own ego, to use Gnostic psychological terms, our own defects. And in the beginning of our spiritual studies too, when this energy works through us, many people suffer through a period of illusion and even depression. Because, as we've seen, there's a catalyzation of energy in our life. But students who learn to aspire, who learn to use that force willingly, will not be affected. They will render homage and respect to the origin of life within themselves. And they will use it well. It's also interesting to talk about, in relationship to the influence of cosmic energies, to also talk about psychological contagion. In our COVID era, people are very concerned about physical contamination. But very few people ever consider or concern themselves with contagion of a psychological type, the contamination of mental states, of negative influences. The truth is that just as there are microbes physically which can kill, there are also psychological elements which can make people sick. People laughed at those who initially proposed that there are viruses and bacteria which cause illness. But later, humanity realized the truth and veracity of these of these microbes. Likewise, there are psychological elements which cause sickness of a physical and mental type. And so as we're talking about psychic hygiene, we're going to talk about how there are elements within the internal dimensions, not seen physically, but within a state of meditation, but also within the dreaming state, where we can confront and see that there are elements that can cause harm. We should be aware of them. We should be concerned. We should take precautions. But also we should take care of what type of elements we take in within our mind. Samuel Monvillard stated the following in Sexology, the basis of endocrinology and criminology. In this day and age, people speak abundantly about physical culture, yet institutes for psychic culture are more necessary now than ever. We admit to the existence of air currents that are truly carriers of infectious bacteria, yet we ignore the existence of mental currents that are transmitters of ultrasensory microbes, capable of damaging, causing illness, and even killing their victims. We can prove this from experience. Thought is material and energetic. It travels. When we think of someone, whether they are conscious of it or not, they will sense it. I'm pretty sure most people have had an experience where thinking of some relative or friend who is overseas or at some great distance, suddenly they receive a phone call from that very person because they were thinking of them at the same time. Thoughts travel. But more importantly for us, the quality of our thought has tremendous consequences. If we're sending thoughts of anger and malice, of resentment and pride, that force has a negative impact on those around us. We have the illusion that somehow we are separate from other people, that we can think, feel, and do whatever we want in the mind, and that there are no consequences. This is a lie. In truth, with our actions, with our deeds, we spread contagion. And people who have perhaps been in the public limelight of political discourse, of culture wars, are people who, because they're constantly being attacked by the negativity of others, they get sick. People age quickly. They become ill. They are unwell. I'm pretty sure if you've looked at the images of presidential candidates who entered office, they look much older than they did when they entered, because they're dealing with psychological contagion, the negativity of humanity, of other people, whether justifiably or not, is irrelevant. The reality is that this is a very true principle. Mental currents exist. They affect people. They can affect us. And we also can be presenting them and sending them to other people unconsciously. And this has to change. We should be masters of our own psychological nature so that we don't cause harm. But also we can learn to protect ourselves and divert harm from ourselves through spiritual methods. In this way, we learn to overcome psychic infections. Samuel Monvillard stated, especially in his book, Revolutionary Psychology, that our level of being attracts our life. Our quality of mind attracts our environment, the people we associate with, the friends we have, even the family members we are born to. All relate to our quality and level of being, which predates even being physically active, being born. The mind and the heart, our thoughts and feelings, are of a subtle matter and energy and consciousness. They have their own reality beyond the body, although they manifest in our physical body when we're awake, when we're active. It's important to remember and reflect on our quality of mind. What is our level of being? What community do we relate with? Who do we associate with? What kinds of people do we attract? What kinds of people do we avoid? We have to ask this question and answer it. Meditate on it. What is our level of being? because what we are psychologically determines where we go in nature. It's a law. It's a fundamental reality. And if our mind is polluted with or saturated with anger, we're going to attract situations of anger. With lust, situations of lust. Pride, likewise. And based on this, we can basically determine what is the outcome of our behaviors. Our negative states of mind create what's called psychic infections. And this has to do, again, with mental currents. We attract in accordance with our level of being, as I said. But if we change our level of being, if we change our quality of life, if we transform ourselves and seek to be spiritual, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be selfless, we will attract people and situations that vibrate at that level of nature. It's a law of nature. It's cause and effect. Sanskrit terms call it karma. So it's important to reflect on this truth. It is very basic, but very hard to realize unless you're really mindful and paying attention to yourself. Now, there are people within different social strata who obviously operate in accordance with their level of conditioning, their level of being. There are some people who are better off and some people who are worse. And we exist in a hierarchy. Spiritually speaking, there is the same truth. There are beings who are more spiritually developed than us and those who are less fortunate than us. One such example of an inferior type of person, obviously, in a spiritual sense, is a medium. Now, if you're not familiar, mediums are people who channel, they preach that they are speaking or manifesting the voices of the dead, those who've died. Disincarnate entities take over their body, and they give wisdom, quote unquote, from the afterlife to those who are physically present. This is an example of a psychic infection within spiritual circles. It's a very big problem because the truth is that no enlightened spiritual being would ever take over the body of another person, because those masters have their own vehicles. Therefore, they don't need another person to manifest themselves here. So mediums who preach or say that they're manifesting Jesus Christ or some other enlightened being are being fooled, because any person can show up at your doorstep, knock on your door and say, "I am Jesus, let me in." Doesn't mean that we're going to open our doors. At least we shouldn't. We have to be very cautious, spiritually speaking. That's an example of a person who, obviously, whose level of being attracts those entities from the infernal worlds, because there are superior regions of nature and there are inferior regions of nature. And so we want to protect ourselves from negative influences, to purify our homes, our mind, so that we don't attract these forces. Because the problem is that these negative entities or elements, we sometimes call them larvae within our tradition, they attach to our physical but also internal vehicles, like the astral body, the mental body, and they suck away your life. They steal your energy. They sap you of vital force. And many of these entities even compel you to behaviors that you would not do on a regular basis, unless if you've been working for some time in a spiritual tradition, trying to become a better person. Perhaps you've had old habits you've trying to kill, trying to abandon. And yet there seems to be some type of compulsion from some direction, somewhere, that pushes one to behave in a wrong way. This has to do with larvae. There are elements, they are basically, in the internal world, they look like bugs, insects, rodents, spiders, many unfortunate and disgusting features. They're very hard to describe, and they're very disgusting. Just as you feel revulsion for cockroaches, you would see these elements internally and be disgusted with them because they are infestations. They are the product of negative states of mind. They're produced by bad behaviors. So we want to cleanse ourselves of these elements because they sap us of life force. This is why Moria stated in the Dayspring of Youth, no evil entity can attach itself to us unless we attract it by thought or by being negative in our actions. The negative medium, easily evoking these lower conditions, causes her astral body to become infected with these parasital forms that drain her vitality. These sap her life force and account for her abnormal appetite. This shows this necessity for a clean body and mind and good health. Sick and sensitive people have more to contend with than is realized, for they attract the larvae of these submerged states. In the new age, we shall be afflicted with mental disorders. And because of this, the silver shield must be developed in order to become immune from unnatural conditions. So we'll talk about what the silver shield is in relation to the mind. We have an image of a man, a silhouette with a colorful halo of light and illumination. No person can really deny that people have an aura. People have a type of atmosphere about them. When we meet new people, we find that we register their quality and character. We try to get an impression of them, a first look, a sense of what their personality and mind and state may be like, what kind of person they are. They have an air about them, to use conventional language. This common phenomenon has to do with mental atmospheres. Physically, we don't see perhaps the mind of a person, but you can sense a person's attitude towards you if you pay attention, if you observe, if you're awake, paying attention. People have a type of energy about them, which reflects their thoughts, their emotions, their behaviors, their impulses, their character. And it all registers within what we call the aura, famously speaking. But here we'll talk about mental atmospheres. Some people have a very different air about them because of the quality of life they live. Obviously, a person who goes to church is very different from someone who goes to the brothel. This has to do with levels of being. So we have to pay attention to our quality of mind. What type of atmosphere do we irradiate? What state of being do we presently sit with? What places do we go? Every person has their own aura, their own register. And if you're very intuitive and perceptive, you can sense this in other people. You can even sense, despite charismatic and kind words, perhaps evil intention from another person, and which creates distrust and suspicion. Our intelligence is manifested within our conduct, our behavior, our outward radiation of thought, feeling, and will. And so it's important to pay attention to our own unique register, our character. In the beginning of our spiritual studies, as we're learning to experience these things for ourselves, many people often become confused. Many people who begin to work with spiritual discipline, they're working with energy, they're learning to awaken their intelligence, become aware, mindful, perceptive. They start to sense that as they're changing their quality of life, that they no longer relate to or resonate with other people, maybe their friends, their family members, their coworkers. And this can cause a great period of disillusionment and suffering, a great state of unhappiness. Many people who perhaps were living one type of lifestyle who become spiritual can verify this. Now, what's important to reflect upon is that as we learn to become genuinely awake, spiritual, in connection with the divine, learning practices like meditation, self-observation, mindfulness, being more present in ourselves day to day, moment by moment, we're gaining skills. We have to be patient because it's like becoming a child again, becoming innocent of mind, innocent of heart, innocent in our personality, our ways of being. Part of this has to do with the fact of when we develop ourselves spiritually, we develop what's called a silver shield. This is a term given by Moria. It's also talked about by Samal Vayor in his books. This silver shield is a aura that protects the mind. So in the beginning of our studies, as I said, we're becoming spiritual and practicing. We feel that we're becoming awake and aware and perceptive of perhaps negative elements from our exterior world. Now, what we do with our aspiration practices, our prayers, our meditations, we give energy and strength to our mental body, the mental vehicle, so that like a shield, this energy protects the mind. It is like armor. And this armor can deflect negative thoughts. You don't become a victim of what other people think, say, and do. You merely observe with a state of serenity and peace, with innocence, neither judging or condemning or disliking or hating the person. You just are awake, aware, and understanding of the other person, and even compassionate. This silver shield, it's called silver because silver as a color relates, spiritually speaking, to the mental body. But this silver shield is a great asset. And it basically develops in us through many practices that we're going to explain later on. And so this helps to protect us from any type of negativity. It helps us be stable in the mind, in the heart, in the body. So that even when you perhaps go to places that would regularly throw off your equilibrium, you remain balanced. This is why Master Moria stated the following in the Dayspring of Youth. Each person has an individual atmosphere and an individual intelligence. When we respond to the new energy and clothe ourselves with our own individuality, we will have no affinity to other mental atmospheres. This separation will cause students difficulty at first in understanding people. For once on the path, we become different in thought as well as in ideas. We are again like little children entering another world, surrounded by those pure atoms that came and remained with us in the first years of our birth. And like children, we neither resist nor attract atoms of the secret enemy. In this way, we are protected from evil. Incidentally, it should be known that the opposition to good is the real cause of unhappiness. So we'll unpack this a little bit. When you are fortified in your aura, your silver shield, your mind, you don't easily get affected by other people. You neither attract to yourself negativity from others, neither do you resist it out of egotistical coercion or anger or reaction. You simply observe with a state of peace those perhaps negative states from other people. This is very important to cultivate in ourselves. As we are doing this, we're developing real individual spiritual identity, something that's cultivated and learned through all of our interactions and with other people. We learn to adapt to different circumstances of life, but be patient as you're experiencing these things. Be patient with yourself because it's something that's learned through trial and error. So the mind, according to Moria in the Dayspring of Youth, as well as Samal Vior in his writings. He talks about this vehicle a lot. This is an image included in the Dayspring of Youth that depicts the mental body. He's holding a caduceus of Mercury, which is a symbol of the mind. And this brilliant aura surrounds him. This is the silver shield. Typically, our mind is influenced by many negative currents, influences, and impressions. In a typical sense, our mind is often a slave of the exterior world. This is very easy to prove. Some people could be addicted to television, to the news, to ingesting negative stories, videos and images of hate, of lust. We care about what other people think, how we dress, how we appear to the world. Likewise, in our thoughts, our feelings and desires to belong, to be accepted, to be praised. Our mental body, our mind, typically is controlled by other influences in the world. But by learning to practice spiritual discipline by exercises such as yoga, meditation, energy work, we take the energies that we carry within and also the Dayspring of Youth, and we learn to throw off any negative influence within our mind, within our heart, within our body. In this way, we radiate our own individual original identity, our own real spiritual nature. And then therefore, there's no need to fit in, to belong. We radiate naturally compassion, happiness, altruism, love for others. We radiate light from our spirit. This is why Moria states the following in the Dayspring of Youth: the importance of this discipline and also the need to throw off the control of the world within our mind stream. The atmosphere of the mental body is controlled by the atmosphere of this world. But by breathing in the energy manifesting in this new age through yoga, we can throw off this control. By aspiring when breathing, we attract the atoms of this new energy into us and slowly conform to their wavelength. These atoms bring us a sensation of joy, similar to a morning in spring. The deeper the student goes, the more does he assume an energy and directness unparalleled in his normal state. He will undergo a complete change and realize as never before the possibilities of his future welfare and how indolent he has hitherto been. You may be familiar with pranayama, breathing exercises, in which we take in the vital energy of our air, our breath, and we combine it with our own creative force. We bring that breath in, and we also raise the energies of our creative, vital potential within our bodies so that they can elevate to our mind and illuminate our mind. And therefore, we experience states of clarity and awareness, mindfulness that are abnormal in consideration of our normal state of being. We undergo a complete change, and therefore we realize that there are potentials that exist for us, a quality of mental and emotional and physical health, spiritual health that we otherwise might not have known. Master Moria refers to the practice of spiritual discipline as aspiration. The term yoga he uses does not reference physical calisthenics. He's not referencing poses of the body, although physical health is important. It's useful within a larger paradigm. What he is talking about is the union of the soul with the divine, from the Sanskrit yug, to reunite. This is the same meaning as relegare in Latin, which means religion, to reunite with the divine. So we have very particular practices we use. We take in the air in our lungs, and we combine it with prayer, even sacred vocalizations. In a state of mindfulness and watchfulness, we combine that air and vital force into our bodies, so that it cleanses us. And then we elevate that force within our base of our spine, within our sexual organs especially, to the mind. In this way, by adopting an attitude of selflessness, of patience, of prayer, we become a better instrument to manifest divinity. It's not a personal ambition, like I want to be spiritual and therefore I'm going to do these practices and get these certain results. That type of attitude does not produce real change. Instead, what produces real spiritual benefits is performing exercises for the well-being of other people, for humanity. Therefore, we seek to become better so that divinity can manifest within our actions. So real aspiration should be impersonal. Our personal desires, our attachments attract negative influences, which we want to avoid. So we learn this difference by learning to observe ourselves, be mindful, to be attentive, to watch our psychological interactions, our thoughts, our feelings, our desires. As Moria states in The Dayspring of Youth, aspiration means that longing for the reality's presence within one's own universe. Real aspiration should be impersonal, for personality attracts atomic intelligences of a personal nature, besides parasitical and disincarnate entities. Within and about us are highly developed atoms, and in our breathing exercises, we attract them into our bodies. They then supply our nervous systems with their energies, and as man is a result of his own type of atoms and atmosphere, he is judged by the quality of atoms he attracts, just as he is judged by the kind of people with whom he associates. So again, going back to our mental atmosphere, the divine beings evaluate our quality of mind in accordance with what energies we bring in. These atomic forces. Are they pure? Are they refined? Or are we saturated with negative qualities? This is something we have to consider. So many people have heard from Salman Vior's teaching about the nature of transmutation, which we talked about at the beginning of this lecture. The creative energy, the sexual force, is the origin of life. It's also the origin of health. How we use this energy determines our spiritual trajectory. Because just as you can create a physical child with that potential, when it is harnessed and controlled and conserved, refined, spiritually speaking, through breathing exercises, prayers, and the ultimate science of alchemy, this creative energy rises within our spine to our mind. It purifies our psychology. It gives us the energy by which we can be really divine spiritual beings, pure of thought, mind, and deed. This energy rises up 2 channels, symbolized by the caduceus of Mercury, with its 7 chakras, as we see here. A chakra simply is a wheel of force. It is where energy circulates. And so we have 7 main primary chakras that manifest within our spinal column, which rise from our gonads and then up to our head. When we work with this quality of force within our bodies, they determine our spiritual life. This is why Moria stated, many occultists are told to conserve their creative energy, to master the lower sex nature. Atoms always find their own level. It is the vapor that rises from the surface of our seminal fluid that gives us this determinative energy in nature. The demand for personal power will not bring these higher forces into operation. So that energy which can be used for pleasure instead is transmuted. It's taken another form and substance in reality. What's interesting is that Moria states that atoms always find their own level, meaning energies that we accumulate always seek to find their own level of balance. If we're bringing in good energy and we're transforming energy into a positive sense in our interior, they will elevate our quality of life. And the vapor that rises, this energy that rises within our internal vehicles from the surface of the seminal fluid, when it is conserved, gives us the force of determination. It determines where we go in nature. Instead of creating conflict and problems, instead of that energy being channeled through desire, through attachments and cravings, we learn to take that force for our spirit. And therefore, we vibrate with higher levels of nature. It's a cosmic law, very basic, but we have many exercises that can teach you how to begin working with this force. Personal ambition will not result in any lasting true change. Instead, compassion does. We'll touch upon a few more points, particularly in relation to negative emotions, because in order to psychically cleanse our emotional, mental temples, our physical bodies, we have to understand the danger of negative emotions. Unfortunately, more people today are becoming more negative emotionally. And what's worse is that these negative emotions are contagious. If one angry person speaks to the whole world in a television broadcast, that can affect millions. It can incite wars. I'm sure we can think of many examples of this within the past few years, where one person infected by negativity saturated the entire collective mind of particular peoples and brought about great disasters. This is because negative emotions are more harmful than any bacteria. So we should protect ourselves from this. But here's what Samuel and Vero had to say about the topic. When we are in the very field of psychology, we find many disorders within people. Everyone is being dragged down by negative emotions. And this is very grave. There is nothing more harmful for profound internal development than negative emotions. Nonetheless, negative people, victims of negative emotions, become more contagious than viruses and bacteria. Grouchy people who are always filled with envy, who are always obnoxious at any given moment, people who are filled with morbid minds at any given time, people who suffer deliriums of persecution, who say they are bewitched, who say they are hated by everybody, are negative and infect groups. They infect others. A negative person can infect other negative people. And if this person dictates a lecture, then he infects thousands of people. They are more dangerous, thousands of times more dangerous than viruses and bacteria. Therefore, we have to understand a basic principle of, we can say, spiritual self-defense, but also psychological purity of mind. We have to learn how to close our doors, psychologically speaking, to negative impressions. We have to watch what we take in our mind. What kinds of books do we read? What do we watch on television? What do we look at on the internet? What images, videos, impressions do we eat with our mind? Because we can listen to perhaps a certain song online and our whole mood will change. It can be afflicted or filled with sadness, with grief, or anger. Many people take great deliberation into what they physically eat, but no consideration about what they psychologically consume. We can eat vegan, all organic food, the best health and nutrition available physically, and yet our minds can be completely poisoned and contaminated with negative elements because we're ingesting so much garbage. Or we relate to certain people who are very negative and toxic. I'm pretty sure anyone who's approaching this type of lecture is coming from a place where perhaps they know someone or people who are very negative, very difficult to deal with, very hard impressions to transform. And so we're going to talk about a principle called closing doors. Closing doors does not mean we avoid people who are harmful. It might mean in the beginning we have some distance, enough to have some equilibrium in our life, spiritually speaking. to know how to relate to that person with wisdom. Because unfortunately, or perhaps better said, fortunately for us, there will perhaps be relationships with people in our, say, our families, who are very difficult to relate to. And yet we can't avoid them because they're family. So I'm pretty sure we all have some similar experience like this. What do? Some people may choose to avoid. Other people may learn to interact with that person with greater intelligence, meaning you're with the person physically, but psychologically, you do not ingest the negativity they give you. In fact, you look at it, you observe it, you understand it, you transform your reactions. This also plays greatly into the topic about the silver shield. Because if you're doing spiritual practices and conserving energy, you have more potential by which to reject and nullify these influences. And better said, to close your doors spiritually, psychologically, so that you don't get affected as much or weighed down by perhaps this person. They don't control you anymore. They don't exert their influence or push your buttons, so to speak. So it's important that we learn how to do it. We do so through observing ourselves and by learning meditation, learning what in us is affected by others. And again, accumulating good energy so that we don't become saturated with negativity, likewise, so that we don't get infected. Samuel Vero made some very powerful points about this in his lecture called Mental Representations, about the need and the importance and the necessity, the urgency of this. Disgracefully, the human being is negative. What would you say, for example, now that we're in this room, if we open the door to some robbers so they can come in? Would it seem correct to you that I should open the door so that these people may enter? What would happen? Nevertheless, we do not exercise such caution with impressions. We open the door to all the negative impressions in the world. These penetrate our psyche and create disasters. They transform themselves into psychological aggregates and develop a negative emotional center within us, and at last fill us with mud. Is this correct? Is it correct for a person who is full of negative impressions emanating from his negative emotional center to have his place among us, that we might open our doors to all the negative impressions of this person? If we do not know how to select impressions, how will we be able to close the doors of our mind to them? We must learn to open and close the doors of our psyche to impressions. Open the doors for noble impressions. Close them to negative and absurd impressions, because negative impressions cause damage. They develop the negative emotional center within us and harm us. So the term psychological aggregates has to do with defects, egos, because a person could be really angry with us, maybe a family member who wants to argue. We may take in that impression, we let it hit our heart, and then we transform that negative energy into a new condition of mind. We create more anger, and therefore we become poisoned ourselves. And therefore we have a positive feedback loop. We react, we retaliate, and therefore that person becomes more intense in their anger, and things spiral out of control. Now, opening and closing doors has to do with how we take in the information through our senses. Closing doors doesn't mean avoiding people. It means being present, being awake, being aware, and understanding the other person. Being patient, watching, being aware, being kind. Impressions are all the information we take in through our senses, but also into our mind. What is the emotional quality that we're receiving from this person? What's the mental state that this person is projecting onto us? And in that process of being mindful of the other person, we also observe our reactions. We observe what in us wants to retaliate, to become upset, to speak harmful words, to be negative. Part of psychic hygiene has to do with observing this process in ourselves and learning how to have balance, neither attracting nor rejecting this influence. It means your energies are present, You have your silver shield in your mind. You have a strong spiritual state of awareness. And therefore, you don't retaliate. Instead, you learn to treat that person with love. This is very challenging. Not easy to do. You're not going to do it in the first day you see your family member. Not easy. But it is basic. Control your emotional center, how you react to this person. Observe it. And if you do need to have some space to transform your own mind so that you don't do something you will regret, then take a minute to step away. Be polite. Say, hey, I need to take a break. Give me a few minutes. Breathe. But hopefully with these practices that we're going to elaborate upon, you will learn to have some stability of mind to be able to approach negative situations like this. Part of our psychic health and well-being has to do with how we connect with our inner divinity. The problem is that if we take in negative impressions and we respond with negativity likewise, we will be more inclined to lie, whether we're conscious of it or not. A lie is a distortion of reality, obviously. Negative emotions, more importantly, transform people into liars. If someone is negative or feels that they're going to create a problem, perhaps with a loved one, family member, and in a negative state of emotion, one doesn't tell all the facts. Now, the problem is that if we lie, we disconnect ourselves, because our inner divinity, known as the Elder of Days within the Gnostic tradition, is truth, is reality, is presence, and is the core principle of our being. If we wish to connect more with that, we should learn to cultivate honesty, even though it is difficult. But of course, one doesn't have to commit sins of commission or omission, but better said, one is diplomatic and wise as serpents and harmless as doves, according to Jesus. If we lie because we're in a negative state of mind, we disconnect ourselves. We become fractured. This is why Samal stated in his lecture on Alcyone and negative emotions, what is most terrible is that negative emotions transform the human being into a liar. The liar produces a mistaken connection because the energy of the Elder of Days, our Father who is in heaven, the truth, flows harmoniously and perfectly throughout the 10 Sephiroth of the Hebraic Kabbalah until reaching Malkut, or the kingdom, the physical person or psychophysical person. The liar connects himself in a wrong way. He intentionally, with his negative emotions, produces a dislocation of his mind, and consequently a lie emerges, which is a mistaken connection. If you've been studying this teaching and applying it for some time, for those who are more experienced, I'm pretty sure you've felt that in a moment where you might have lied or have lied, you feel weak because the energies of your inner spirit are not manifesting within the moment. They get disconnected. You feel a lack of confidence, a lack of ability, a lack of cohesion. Therefore, we should learn not to lie. We should, and first off, learn to identify negative emotions so that we don't have to be in a position like that. Part of mental cleanliness, or in another sense, the reason why many people feel like they have a clouded mind, perhaps lack a sense of stability in their lives, they feel drained mentally, emotionally, is because of idle conversation. Part of this work of closing doors to negative impressions has to do with a principle called interior isolation and conservation. In the Hermetic traditions, it relates to the science of Mercury, Hermes, whereby for some practitioners, they would adopt a vow of silence so that they can learn to introspect and understand their own inner world. This is a very useful practice to understand the root origins of many distractions in ourselves, and also the root of many contaminants of mind. how certain elements psychologically create conflict in us. Now, a basic practice is adopting a vow of silence. Obviously, for religious reasons, people can do so, especially on holidays, or we've done this at retreats as well. It always annoys a few people who try to talk to you and yet you're silent because you're practicing mindfulness. This is why at some retreats we would have a little card saying we're practicing a vow of silence so no one will get offended. But still, people do get upset still. It's a useful practice to conserve energy so that you don't feel tense and strained and merely just speaking out of a lack of mindfulness of what we're doing. Too much idle talk, speaking with no meaning, creates a sense of contamination in the mind too. Silence, like a lake, when it is stable and pure and unrippled or limpid and calm, in reality, reflects deeper states of the spirit. Stillness of mind can be helped. A meditative state can be developed through physical silence. So perhaps if we don't take a vow of silence, we can learn to practice this in the day. Maybe not taking the time to speak our mind at the first instant to prove our point, but instead saving our energies, conserving our mental force, observing ourselves. Become aware of what we say and do when it is necessary, so that we learn to become more mindful, more pure of heart, more psychically clean. Moria stated the following in the Dayspring of Youth: negative people seldom render great service to their fellow men and talk a great deal. An unthinking talk is responsible for much of the worry and anxiety in this world, for it distorts the imagination. Constant conversation often hinders the currents that flow into our system, and this hampers one's development. Hence, the student should not indulge too much in trivial conversation. When he does speak, he should endeavor to ennoble the thoughts of others. Some teachers place their pupils under a vow of silence, for by saying little, they protect themselves from onslaughts upon their atmospheric sheaths. We'll conclude a couple practices you can use to promote psychic and spiritual hygiene. We often utilize perfume in our tradition, or better said, incense. You can, we'll provide some links at the end, but you can basically use a charcoal within a burner, usually a container that you can hold, and you can use different resins or even light incense sticks if you prefer, so that the perfume of the smoke will purify your home. The perfume of incense is very important to use daily because it helps to reject negative influences, but also promote spiritual mental healing. It also cleanses the internal worlds of any type of astral larvae. So there are three uses of perfume or incense: cleaning, perfuming, and healing. We'll talk about each three in a bit. Solomon Vior stated the following in The Perfect Matrimony: the devotee must purify his bedroom daily with the smoke of special aromatic substances. Incense purifies the astral body. A good incense attracts the great masters whom we need for our work. So high quality incense attracts the masters to come to our home to give us their blessings. But also, according to Moria and the Lord God of Truth Within, proper incense is a barrier to the approach of entities and elementals from the underworld. So in terms of cleansing, we can work with sage. You can often find these at a Whole Foods even. Many stores have them available in this form, a sage stick. Light the sage, pray to your inner divinity to help cleanse your home and your mind, your heart, your environment. You can do certain prayers along with the sage cleanse and smoke. We often use the conjuration of the 4 and the conjuration of the 7 in our studies to help remove any type of obsessive thoughts, negativity, or even astral larvae within one's home. You can take the smoke, bathe yourself in it, smoke around your head, especially if you have preoccupations and worries, around your body, around your aura. It's very powerful and useful. If you want to get more radical, if you really want to clean your home, especially if you not done this before, you can work with sulfur. Now, be warned that sulfur is extremely toxic when it's burned. Use a very little bit. Usually you'll take a charcoal within a burner. You'll take about a teaspoon of sulfur powder. Make sure there are no living things in the room that you want to perfume or that you want to sulfur out. You don't stay in the room. Make sure you leave. Make sure you have somewhere else to go, that the smoke or the fumes are not going to get out of the room. You can make sure the door is closed. You can even open up the window if you have one in that room. Sulfur fumes are extremely powerful. Now, while they're dangerous to breathe in, they can irritate your lungs or affect your lungs very severely. If you're sensitive, especially, it's very toxic. You don't want to be around to breathe in. The fumes themselves will, in the internal world, clean out any gunk that you have. Astral larvae, negative thoughts, anything that may be bothering you. They even reject negative influences from any type of entity that may be trying to harm you and your home. You use this sulfur powder, cleans it out. You can burn it for 3 days, take 3 days consecutively, or 9 days if you feel like the environment, you just moved in someplace, it feels heavy, feels dense, you feel like the place is just saturated with negative energy. Work with sulfur. Now make sure that, again, when you light it, don't be in the same room. Leave for a couple hours, come back later in the day. You can also take sulfur powder. Without burning it, you can sprinkle it. If you can't burn it where you're at, you can sprinkle the powder across the room. The fumes in the internal world will rise up and clean your home. This can be very effective too. Obviously, burning is more powerful, but literally you can get great results just from the astral and vital fumes from the powder itself. You can also take a sulfur bath. Sulfur clumps in water, so you can take it with a bubble bath. Usually about a tablespoon of sulfur powder you can put in the bathtub with you, but with some bubble soaps or whatever you have, it'll make sure the powder itself won't clump together so much. It'll spread out evenly and will dissolve. We can also work with a perfuming incense like frankincense. Frankincense is often used to invoke divine aid. Here's what Samal Vior had to say about an igneous rose. Authentic frankincense is obtained with a olibanum tree. It contains great elemental powers. If frankincense is soaked in water, it has the power to make the elemental creatures of the water concur to our call. When frankincense is applied to the forehead, it has the power to make a headache caused by strong mental preoccupation to disappear. The smoke of frankincense has the power to make the masters and angels of the invisible world to assist. Frankincense prepares the environment for the Gnostic rituals. Frankincense is a great vehicle for the spiritual waves of pure devotion. It helps the mystical retreat because it serves as an instrument of devotion. In the ancient temples of the mysteries, those who were ill were surrounded with the smoke of frankincense in order to be cured. It also smells nice. Frankincense opens up the heart. It helps you be honest, like to be frank with someone, kind of a play on words. But frankincense is very useful for deepening your meditative practice and prayer, but also after perhaps a strong use of sage, which can have a pungent smell, you can work with frankincense afterward to perfume the environment and invoke the spiritual masters you seek in your meditative discipline. You can also heal yourself through your zodiacal perfume. So if you're feeling sick, if you're feeling a little off, you're not on your best state of mind, work with the perfume relating to your zodiac. You simply light a charcoal, you take the fumes, or you burn usually a resin if you can, or these different perfumes. You can obviously, some of them may be a little different than just resin, but some of them are available in sticks as well. You can search online to find them. For Aries, you have the perfume of myrrh. For Taurus, the perfume of costus root, an aromatic herb. For Gemini, the perfume of mastic. For Cancer, the perfume of camphor. For Leo, the perfume of frankincense. Virgo has the perfume of white sandalwood. Libra, the perfume of galbanum. Scorpio, the perfume of coral. We do suspect that due to typographical error in some of the very old editions of Samanvir's writings that weren't corrected or caught, he might have been referring to copal, because coral, I've heard from some students, doesn't really burn on a charcoal. Copal does, and it's a very sweet, aromatic, and cleansing perfume. So you might want to try that if you're a native of Scorpio. You also have Sagittarius relating to the perfume of aloes wood. You also have Capricorn, the perfume of pine extract. Aquarius is the perfume of spikenard, and Pisces, the perfume of thyme. You can reference in this PDF how to use incense. It's an article from Glorian Publishing, which talks about all these instances that we mentioned, but also many more. I highly recommend you study it, apply it in accordance with your needs. If you really want to fortify the silver shield of your mental body, work with the magic of the runes. The runic exercises are exceptional. They are a form of yoga in which you position your body to match the runic alphabet Futhark, the Nordic language, the Nordic letters. And with prayer, mantra, vocalization, aspiration, inhalation of the vital forces and elevating them within your body, you also assimilate and charge yourselves with the forces of nature. It's very good to perform the runes out in the open. If you can go to someplace nice, like a park, someplace quiet, alone, you can do these mantras and runes and practices to charge yourself. There's also a video available from Glorian Publishing, which talks about how to perform 7 vowels, 7 runic letters from that tradition. Highly recommended. Lastly, meditation. To really deepen your spiritual and mental health, your well-being, your psychic hygiene, learn to meditate. We have 2 courses from us. We have Gnostic Meditation, but also Glorian Publishing's Meditation Essentials. Meditation will teach you how to transform negative impressions. It'll teach you how to close doors. It'll teach you how to observe your own mental reactions to negative impressions, but also how to cancel them, to not be affected, and also to understand the root of our own defects, so that by changing them, by eliminating them, and by developing real virtue, we have enough stability and consciousness to really reflect divinity within. At this point in time, I'd like to open up the floor to questions. You're welcome to type in your questions in the chat. And I'll be happy to respond to them. We have a question. How does visualization relate to the shield or the silver shield? It's a good question. You can meditate and imagine this aspect of your mental body. And with enough concentration and visualization, with focus, you can see the actual aura. You can see it internally within, perhaps you physically fall asleep and you enter the dream state. You can access what that reality is like. So visualization relates to the silver shield in that any perception of an internal type has to do with your imagination. So when you sit to meditate and you imagine something, you're using the vital forces of your creativity, and you're also activating aspects of your psychology, your consciousness, so that you could perceive this energy shield, which you develop through this type of practice. There's a deep relationship between imagination and the mind. The mind and imagination are deeply correlated. I think some people get confused and oftentimes disassociate them, primarily because the mind itself and the imagination are, we say, different dynamics. To imagine is to perceive, whereas the mind and its function has to do with thought. Now, when the mind is calm, when it is perfectly still, like a lake, then you can imagine more clearly. And therefore, you can start to activate the real depth, profundity, clarity, and visualization available through the silver shield, because the silver shield facilitates that process. It protects your mind. It is an expression of your energy. And that energy helps to calm yourself so that when your mind is still, you start to perceive more images internally. So they're deeply related. They're oftentimes different aspects of some of the same principles. but we talk about them separately so that we have better understandings. We could break it down. We have a question. In the day spring of youth, Moria states that when we activate the solar force, it feels like it could knock one over. Could you elaborate? My answer would be practice the runes. See what I'm talking about, or see what he's talking about. So I know some people I've seen on retreats that when we did runes, usually we'll have the runic exercises. People will be performing, say, the rune Fa, the rune Dorn. I've noticed some people who felt dizzy because they've never worked with that energy before. So in the beginning, as you're learning to transmit that force in you, it can be disorienting because it's something new. It's also something very powerful. And also we have to acclimate ourselves little by little to become better vehicles of that energy. So I wouldn't recommend on your first shot to just take or spend 2 hours or 1 hour to do runes. Maybe take 10 minutes, 15 minutes and learn to experiment, because that energy is the power of life. It's the power of a sun, literally speaking. The solar energy within your own body, within nature, manifesting in you. So it's powerful. So take your time with it. With time and training, you can do 1 hour, 2 hours of runes, even 3 or more, depending on your needs. We have a question. How do we get out of negative states when we do not want to, when we feel stuck in the negative states? Distract yourself. I don't mean necessarily doing things that are trivial or perhaps harmful, but instead engage in activities that take your mind off whatever the problem is, whatever you're fixated on. Mental and psychic obsessions are can be very intense, especially if you're in a negative mood. Can be very hard to get out. The thing to remember is to take the time to find activities that you like, that help you relax. Some people, when they're moody, they decide, take a walk. Maybe you have a project going on at the time or something difficult that you have to do. You're preoccupied, put it aside, distract yourself. Go out for a walk. Take some yoga classes, or better said, do some yoga exercises. You can do the runes. You can pray. You can write. Some people find writing therapeutic. Write poetry. Write some work of literature, whatever inspires you. Now, obviously, not all these examples are going to may not be for you, but obviously there are examples of things that people have used in the past when they are caught in a rut. They're stuck in a negative state and they seem to not get out. What makes it worse is that you fixate. What I found very useful if I'm in a negative state of mind, if I'm preoccupied with a problem, I'll take a sage stick, light it, pray, and then perfume my head. I'll do the conjuration of the 4 and the conjuration of the 7. Those prayers, along with sage smoke, will remove mental obsessions. It can help you get out of a negative state. But it takes skill. It takes practice. Maybe getting some exercise will help. If you feel negative, maybe go to the gym. Take a walk, as I said. Exercise. And also pray deeply. As one person is mentioning in the chat, pray passionately to your inner divine mother. Your divine mother has the power to take you out. You have to remember her. And sometimes she works in ways that, through certain activities, she can inspire you. Listen to your heart. Follow the guidance of your intuition. Whatever you feel may help you, whatever activity, do so with prayer to remember your divine mother in your heart. She will take you out. And she can do so by any of the activities we mentioned, if you really are mindful and paying attention and working to take a moment of reprieve of rest. But our being is the one who can take us out. We have to remember her. How does carbon dioxide pollution affect us spiritually? Well, the pollution in the air obviously affects the quality of our energy. So how does pollution or carbon dioxide pollution affect us spiritually? The quality of the air and what we ingest in our lungs, but also the food we eat and obviously the impressions we take in, all contribute to the quality of our creative force. So how healthy we are, or what potential we have to be more healthy. Now, carbon dioxide pollution, obviously, if the environment is poor, obviously that'll affect the health of our lungs, but also in terms of the air we breathe in, that'll affect the quality of our creative energy, because our creative energy is literally formed from, or is formed by the combination of many forces. The food we eat, the air we take in, the water we drink, and the impressions we transform with our mind. These all contribute to a greater potency or impotency of force. So obviously we want to do the best we can in the environment we live in, to be eating as healthy as we can, consuming as much healthy food, but also being more conscious of what we breathe, maybe quitting smoking, so to speak. Obviously, this is very basic, but those things do add up. So for your spiritual hygiene, obviously your inner spirit will have more energy to work with to perform transformations in you if your lungs are cleaner, your heart is cleaner, your mind is cleaner. They all add up together. Obviously, the cleaner vehicle we are, the greater expression that our spirit can manifest in us. You're welcome. We have a question. How do we recognize the dayspring of youth? You recognize it in yourself, not just from some some early history in the 60s by looking at what happened culturally, but you look at it, how it manifests in you whenever you do prayers, or better said, transmutation exercises. So the runes is a great way to activate that force of the dayspring of youth. It's literally the force of life that manifests in the spinal column, the lungs, the chakras, the mind. When you do prayer and runes and mantras, you sing and vocalize with fidelity, with faith, with joy. You feel re-energized. You feel real youth flowing through your meridians, your vital body, your energetic channels, so to speak. And that dayspring of youth is your own creative force that's being transmuted in you. It feels like a day in spring, according to Moria, something refreshing. You only sense it by doing it. And you only sense it by doing it every day, being consistent. So if you want to activate and recognize that dayspring of youth in you, work with the runes, work with them daily. If you want to get out of a rut, like I believe your earlier question was about, you work with the dayspring of youth. It'll help you get out by praying to the Divine Mother with the runic exercises to resonate with a higher level of being. The more you practice it, the more you will see it and recognize it and become more familiar with it. So that's my recommendation. Also, there's another question. Are there any benefits of moving to the countryside? Yes, obviously. Cities are packed and dense and heavy and saturated with a lot of problems. Not to say that the countryside doesn't have its problems, but at the same time, it's less heavy in terms of atmospheric energy. Many people report, obviously, going to the forest outside of any city where, walks in nature are very powerful. I recently just took a walk today with my wife. We were out in the countryside away from the city, enjoying the fresh air, but also the prana, the life force out in nature. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits moving to the countryside. But if you can't live outside the city, then, make trips, take the time. It cleans your mind, literally. Cleans your vital depth, your mental body, your astral body, getting out in nature. Because those forces are very primordial and raw. They'll help you. But you got your karma. You got to live where you got to live. Obviously, we try to make choices when we can. So we have a question. Could you elaborate on the solar power of runes? And also, what does Moria mean when he says we get ennobled by the solar force? Solar power has to do with the force of life, the force of creation. And the greatest force of creation that we carry within is our sexual glands. We are ennobled by or empowered by the solar force in the sense that this energy awakens the greatest virtues of the soul. We have a greater nobility of spirit, greater ethics, more creativity, more compassion when we work with this creative energy in us, the solar force. We find it in our sexual glands. It is the force of life, of creation, the sexual power. When we learn to use it for the spirit, it ennobles us, makes us acolytes or accolades within the divine knighthood, the spiritual brotherhood or initiatic hierarchies of the divine, which we talk about in a course called The Secret Path of Initiation, the White Lodge, which are those beings who are perfecting or have perfected themselves, spiritually speaking. So to ennoble yourself with the solar force means to work with that creative energy in you, but also when you work with the solar power of runes, you're adopting certain postures with your body to accumulate force within nature. You're combining the forces of nature with your prayer and vocalizations, your breath work, in combination with the solar power of your own creative vital force. So they mix together, they combine, and then they become augmented. They magnify, they expand, they enlighten. You're combining fuel with fuel in order to revolutionize your psychology. So work with the energy. Work with that force. It is the true source of real, genuine, divine spiritual character, kindness, compassion, happiness. We have a question. What happened in the 60s that caused negative energies in society? So it wasn't the energy in it. Well, obviously the energy is a volatile force, the dayspring of youth, or the Aquarian influence, the Dionysian wave. Now, as I was mentioning earlier that in the lecture that creative energy is, in nature, within the cosmos, was revolutionary or is revolutionary. That force called the dayspring of youth has to act. The problem is not the energy, it's how we use it. So the problem with our humanity is that in the 60s, we received that energy in a revolutionary impetus, but we transformed it with our desire. So instead of taking that energy and using it to feed our spiritual values, we corrupted ourselves. We become degenerated. We destroyed and continue to destroy our potential. So society became more intensely difficult and negative because people did not want to work on their ego. We took in that energy, but did not use it consciously. So that's the difference. This is the polarity of Dionysus. That energy can provide spiritual inebriation, spiritual enlightenment, or the intensification of desire and suffering. Depends on how we use the energy. We have a question. What exactly are the vital values? The master defines this as a way to live longer. Can you elaborate? So vital values relate to what we call, in Gurdjieffian terms, Baban Candlemas. Gurdjieff was a mystical teacher of the Fourth Way school that Ouspensky later promulgated around the time of, it was more than 100 years ago or so, early 1900s in Russia. He called these vital values or vital capital Baban Candlemas. This is a language from the internal worlds. Our brain, physically speaking, as well as our heart and our spinal column, our three centers of thought, feeling, and will, have a predetermined sum of vital currency. Every action requires energy. And in order to make a certain action, you take out money from the bank, so to speak. The more intellectual action, the more vital values you deplete within your intellectual brain. Likewise with the heart and our instinctive, motor, and sexual centers, so to speak, sexual brain. The problem is if you waste all those energies, like you think too much, or you are having too many negative emotions, or you have too many activities with your body, you deplete yourself. And people who get sick mentally or emotionally or physically is because they've exhausted all their vital capital. They've basically drawn all their sum in their bank. And when they have no more money or energy left in that center, that brain deteriorates, it dies. This explains why certain people have perhaps mental illnesses or emotional sicknesses or physical debilitating conditions, because they've wasted all their energies in those centers. So in order to live longer, we can learn to transmute the creative energy. You can put more money in your bank. You can preserve those values too, not only by conserving your life force, your sexual energy, and transmuting it, but also you can also conserve what you have already. You can learn to not waste energy, which has to do with earlier in the lecture where we talked about closing doors, for example, not identifying with negative emotions or thoughts, the toxicity of negative people, choosing to identify or associate with certain people based on your needs, your spiritual well-being, or transforming your relationships in general. By eliminating your own defects and desires through meditation, we learn to conserve our energy, because our own ego or desires waste energy. Anger obviously is an explosion of atomic force, so to speak. The same thing with lust, especially, or pride, or resentment, or fear. These elements waste energy, but if you eliminate those elements in you that waste energy, you save it, and you live longer, you're healthier. So there's a great incentive to perform this work, because it'll help us live more balanced and healthier lives. Not as sick, not as diseased. We have another question. So, ergo, would the dayspring of youth be the most potent way to transform one's harmful behaviors into positive attitudes, if harnessed correctly through study, prayer, and practice? Yes, most especially meditation and transmutation. So that energy is best used in you when you are working to comprehend your own faults, your own defects, and removing them. When you develop real virtue, when you transform anger into love, pride into humility, gluttony into temperance, lust into chastity, you're developing the virtues of the soul. You do so through works with energy, but also by meditating on your defects. Obviously, prayer is important because we have to really commune with God, the being. Without that, there is no possible way to really establish a deeper connection, and to use those positive influences of the dayspring of youth, both without and within, with harmony. We have a question here. If we waste our vital values in one brain, can we restore or recapture them by using that brain virtuously, as sick as it may be? That's a really good question. The truth is that you can, to a degree. We can get help. If we have a sickness, whether mentally or emotionally, we've wasted all the energies of that brain and have suffered perhaps a debilitating sickness. The reality is that by working with the creative solar force within our sexual glands through transmutation, especially through alchemy, that energy can help you to restore the balance of the depleted brain. You can also get help from internal masters of medicine, spiritual healers within the higher worlds, within dreams, who can treat your mental, emotional, or vital bodies, whatever organ is or body is sick, so that you can be restored. So you do it by acting virtuously, obviously. Whatever behaviors made you sick, obviously stop doing them. Adopt beneficial action, adopt virtuous practice, adopt chastity, transmutation of the creative force. And that way your brain will be more nurtured and vitalized. Or whatever brain is sick, you can heal it. So it's possible. It's also a very patient and difficult process, but one that one can perform with the help of divinity, especially. So we have a good question. If one should avoid negative influences of certain individuals, how does sacrifice for others fit into this? It's a really good question. In the beginning, you may find it very difficult to relate to certain people. In many cases, we may not have the balance to transform the situation. It could be very toxic, very difficult, very painful. You have to rely on your intuition and the guidance of your inner divinity to show you what the right course of action is. And be patient. Be patient for the results and the answers. But other times, because such relationships can be difficult, it's actually an act of sacrifice to take the time to perhaps take care of your needs and be balanced to a degree, a relative degree, because we can't help other people if we are incapable, if we're impotent, spiritually speaking, if our intentions don't align up with our actions, if we want to be spiritual and do good for this person and yet they keep harming us. Sometimes the best thing is to take a break, gain your balance, meditate on yourself. Sometimes closing doors means creating a little distance so that maybe not separation, but at least some time for you to isolate, psychologically speaking. This is why many masters would meditate in solitude. They would take the time to abandon society, abandon their obligations, perhaps for an appointed time or term, in order to gain enough balance and stability to understand themselves, but also to have enough strength so that when they did go back to society, they knew how to handle the trauma or the difficulty there. Many myths teach this, or many religions also show this principle. Some people think that abandoning the world altogether is the necessary thing, and they do it in an indeterminate way. They do it for an indeterminate time. They just abandon the world. And obviously we don't support that argument. We need to be a part of society, but it also means we have to know how to help society. We need balance ourselves in order to help other people be balanced. If you're a train wreck, you're not going to teach someone else how to get their mess in order. You can't sacrifice for others if you have no stability. So you can take the time to get your, act in order, get things right. And then when you're stable and fine and no longer afflicted by so much negativity, you can begin the real work of re-engaging with certain people. I speak from experience. I used to have relationships and people I knew in the past who were very toxic. And I had to take some time in the beginning to develop my own practice, but also when I gained enough stability to re-engage with the world, with certain individuals. But obviously there's a shock there. And that's an aspect of sacrifice that is very difficult to achieve, because perhaps you come back from a retreat, you're re-energized, you're happy, you're going to conquer the world. You're happy, you're at peace, you have a sense of nobility and purpose. But then you enter the cities, you come back to society, and the heaviness hits you. So then you have to learn how to maintain that momentum you gain spiritually on retreat in order to be able to apply it to your community. That's the real work. Some people, actually a lot of people, when they come back to the world, they lose it. They forgo their discipline, they forget everything, they easily get swallowed by the moon, according to Samal Vior, by mechanicity, by habits, by conditions. So it's a difficult balance. You got to constantly negotiate and renegotiate that within yourself. How much space do you need in solitude, isolation, psychologically, maybe physically too, but psychologically, in order to be more useful and a better expression of your inner divinity? So that way, when you do choose to associate with certain people, they don't impact you in a negative way. In fact, they may change because of your character. This happened with me in terms of certain relationships and friendships I had in the past, people I had to distance myself from, but then eventually came back with a renewed purpose. And the relationship is no longer negative, but positive, because divinity was able to make the correct changes and expressions or manifestations in my life, because I was working on my defects that were causing me problems. So that's how you sacrifice better for others, is first, gain your stability, but then, time and again, refine yourself. Any other final questions? Okay, any other final thoughts? We'll conclude. I thank you all for coming. I wish you a very happy new year, full of prosperity and hope. And may your spiritual discipline be reinvigorated. May you be inspired by your inner divinity. And may you be a better service to your community. So I thank you all for coming.